Hey folks, Ash here to talk about my top 3 games of 2022, and it is my great honor to do so as GVG's either second to last video or very last video of the year. Steve and I still haven't quite decided which order our videos are going up in, but either way, it is my great honor to be here talking to you about my top 3 games of the year, and what a year it was. I did unfortunately have kind of the same issue as my colleague Derek, in that I don't feel like I got to play an exceptionally huge range of games this year, just because my free time was at a minimum. I don't have kids like he does, but I do have a full-time job outside of GVG, so I just didn't feel that I had a ton of free gaming time this year. The main thing I really feel like I missed out on this year was indies. I love indie games, and I feel like I just unfortunately missed out on playing some of the indie darlings from this year that I really want to go back and fix. But yeah, I still did play a pretty decent range of games this year, and 3 of them rose to the top of the pile for me. First, I'd like to get a couple of, or I'd like to mention a couple of runners-up, just to make my top 3 maybe a little bit more interesting. Maybe some of these it'll surprise you that they're not in my top 3. So really quickly, Live Alive. Really love this game. Loving the HD 2D visuals that Square Enix are, going for with so many of their games. Can't wait to see more of that in Octopath Traveler 2 next year. Really love some of the stories, especially the far future and the Middle Ages. Some really great storytelling in those chapters specifically. Obviously, an amazing soundtrack, both originally composed and remastered by Yoko Shimomura, my favorite musician of all time. Megalomania is one of the coolest boss themes ever. Yeah, I had a great time with Live Alive, and it is definitely a runner-up for me, but it didn't quite make it into the top 3. And then also, my other runner-up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Tribute Games and .emu did a wonderful job bringing a brand new Ninja Turtles beat-em-up into the gaming scene in 2022. I love this game. It is absolutely oozing with love and attention to detail. There's so much nostalgia for the 80s Ninja Turtles cartoon in this game, packed into every bit of animation. It's got some of the best sprite art and best sprite animation I have seen this side of Third Strike. It is truly a gorgeous game. Not surprising, but T. Lopes, who composed the game, absolutely killed it. He just continues to be an absolute master of his craft. But I will say, I'm not finding it quite as eminently replayable as, like, Streets of Rage 4, for example. That's a game that I keep going back to constantly. And I do go back to Shredder's Revenge for sure, but just not quite as readily. Again, excellent, excellent game, but didn't quite crack my top 3. But what did crack my top 3? Well, let's talk about that. So, at number 3, we've got Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I love this game. Y'all know I love Kirby. Kirby is my favorite Nintendo character of all time, but that doesn't mean that's the reason he got into my top 3. For example, I would never have put a game like Kirby Star Allies into my top 3 because, it was a perfectly fine game, but it didn't stand out in any particular way. But Kirby and the Forgotten Land, this is one of the best Kirby games of all time, and it's almost hard to believe that this is Kirby's first 3D, first fully mainline 3D game. It's hard to believe because it's just so seamless. You play this game and it's like Kirby has been a 3D platformer all along because it all feels so natural. Talk about an absolutely effortless feeling transition into 3D, and that's not to say that, the development wasn't difficult. I'm sure it was. Game development is hard, and I'm sure tons of effort went into creating such a wonderful game, but when you play it, it feels like Kirby has been in 3D all along. The level design is so good in this game. It's so fun to explore every nook and cranny for every last Waddle Dee, and figure out what you need to do to unlock other Waddle Dees, certain little objectives you can do in each level, and some of them are so cute. I mean, this game is like the gaming equivalent of a warm hug. It is so cozy, it is so warm and fuzzy, and that's Kirby in a nutshell. But I mean, one of the later levels in the game, one of the Waddle Dees you unlock, optionally, you just have to take a nap by the pool. You just literally use Kirby's sleep ability by the pool, and that gets you a Waddle Dee, and that's just one of the many charming things I love about this game. Even by Kirby standards, we all know Kirby has amazing music, amazing soundtracks, but even by Kirby standards, Forgotten Land soundtrack is top-notch. And Northeast Frost Street, in particular, is one of my favorite new Kirby tracks ever, and I just really loved just listening to this game as well. It is just such a warm, comforting 3D platformer to play through, and like most Kirby games, it isn't very difficult in the main game, but then you get to the post-game stuff, and man, this is when Kirby's combat really shines. This is some of the best combat Kirby's ever had. I love the dodge move that turns everything into slow motion when you do a last-minute dodge, kind of like Kirby's version of Witch Time. It is such a smart addition And especially when you get into the, like, super, like, in-game stuff, like the more challenging stuff, like the Ultimate Cup Z, the design of these fantastic boss battles really shines. The moves are so well choreographed, but some of the later boss fights give you just enough time to react, but you really have to be paying attention for the tells. And when you learn a fight, you know, when you go from getting completely just destroyed in one of the in-game Ultimate Cup Z fights to practicing and learning the movesets and everything and learning all the tells, and then getting, you know, going back and getting through the fight without even getting hit or barely getting damaged, it is such satisfying feeling, and this might really be the best that Kirby's combat has ever been. It's just a fantastic game all around. There's really nothing I can say against it. Yeah, there are a couple of knocks here and there, like, you know, it sucks that you have to finish a level when you go back in to get collectibles you missed. It's annoying that you can't just quit out of a level, things like that, but really, those are just really small nitpicks in the face of what is otherwise just a really fantastic game, and this is among the best Kirby has ever been, and I cannot wait to see where 3D Kirby goes from here. All right, time for number 2. And my number 2 game of 2022 is Horizon Forbidden West. And this was a tough one because Horizon Forbidden West was actually my number 1 game of the year for a long time, for several months. And it wasn't until a little bit more recently that it was supplanted by what would become my actual number 1. Those of you you follow me on Twitter, have been hearing me talk in other videos, you may know what's coming, but we'll get to that. So Horizon Forbidden West. Absolutely stunning visuals. This is the best looking game of the year as far as I'm concerned, one of the best looking games I've ever played. The game is absolutely bursting with natural beauty. The color palette in this game, just exploring, it's just beautiful. There were so many times that I would just stop and swing the camera around and take in these incredible visuals. I've heard seen some people complain that maybe it's a little bit too visually busy, maybe the colors are too saturated, maybe it's a bit too much. I don't agree with that. I think this is an absolutely stunning game. And not just the vistas, the machine designs, the way they move, the performance in terms of frame rate is shockingly smooth. The game just in general, it has no right looking as good as it does, and performing as well as it does, in my opinion. It really is just stunningly gorgeous. It also has a really great story. I mean, one of the reasons I loved Horizon Zero Dawn was because of the extremely provocative setup. You want to know what happened to the world, why are there robot animals and robot dinosaurs and stuff roaming the land, like what caused the apocalypse? And while we got most of those answers in Zero Dawn, Forbidden West really expands and continues the lore in Zero Dawn in what I feel is a really natural way. One thing I do love in particular about Forbidden West is how it makes Aloy's friends more important to the story. It's no longer Aloy alone against the world, and she's the only one with access to all this information. Now, she's bringing her friends into the fold, and her friends are now learning about everything that she learned about in the first game. And it makes for, I think, a more interesting character-driven story than perhaps what we got in the first game. So, while maybe some of the most interesting mysteries were already explored and answered in Zero Dawn, I do think the character-driven part of the story in Forbidden West is actually better. It really goes to some interesting places. It is a shame about that ending, though. I know my buddy Steve and I disagree on this. I didn't love the last-minute ending twist. Of course, no spoilers, don't worry. Personally, didn't land with me. You know, feels kind of like sequel bait, but I'm still going to be there for Horizon 3 day one, regardless of how I feel about the ending. And, 99% of the story I loved. I did initially think that the combat was maybe a little bit overcomplicated from the first game. I do think there's still maybe a couple too many damage types, but once I kind of learned not to rely on some of the cheap, overpowered stuff from the first game and learn to kind of reassess my playstyle and find some new ways to take on different machines in this game, the combat really opened itself up to me, and it is just really, really great combat. I love the way the machines move. I love how different machines often take completely different approaches, and some of the new machines, like the Trimmer Tusk, they're larger than life, and it's exhilarating to go up against them and figure out different strategies for taking them out and targeting different parts. And I know some people seem to kind of be down on Horizon's combat, but I just don't see it. I think it's great, and I think Forbidden West, it expands the combat in some important ways, while still having a couple of flaws here and there. Again, probably a few too many damage types. I didn't think that Aloy's skill tree in Forbidden West was quite as interesting to unlock as in Zero Dawn, but again, those are minor quibbles at best, and Horizon Forbidden West, really, it would have been my game of the year, if not for what ended up being my #1 game of the year a little bit later on. And, well, I guess it's that time. It is time to talk about my #1 game of 2022, and that game, of course, is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. God, this game, I don't even know where to begin. You know, whereas with Horizon Forbidden West, when I finished it, I had a great time, I loved it, but then I was done and I moved on. With Xenoblade Chronicles 3, when I finished this game, and by the way, I finished it like over the course of 4.5 months. It took me like 150 hours because I wanted to do every last thing that I possibly could. I didn't want it to end. I did every side quest, every hero quest, every ascension quest. I explored every map fully. I just did everything I possibly could because I didn't want it to end. And so 150 hours over 4.5 months later, I finally finish it. And what do I want to do? What's the first thing I want to do? I want to go right back in and do the post-game content. Then I buy the DLC, and I do the DLC that's out. And then I can't wait for the other DLC to come out, so I can just return to this game and this amazing world over and over again. And that's kind of what really clinched it for me. I really wrestled with this for a while because I wanted to make sure I wasn't succumbing to recency bias, because Horizon was my game of the year for quite a while. And then, of course, I played Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I'm like, whoa, maybe this is it, but am I just saying that because it's more recent? And I really wrestled with this for a while. What I ultimately came down to, though, is, you know, I had to remind myself how I usually decide my favorite game of the year, and how I usually determine that is what game makes me feel the most. You know, I'm a pretty emotional guy, and so for me, the most memorable game of any year is going to typically be the game that makes me feel the most. And when I realized that once I finished Xenoblade 3, all I wanted to do was go right back in and spend more time with these incredible characters in this fantastic world, that's what clinched it. The emotional highs and lows of this game just hit me differently and harder than any other game I've played this year. I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about some of the really strong emotional beats in that game. And look, I get it. It's not for everybody. If you know me and you know my tastes, you know that I love anime, and I love anime bullshit. And if you're not into that, Xenoblade is not your series, and I respect that. But I have an infinite tolerance for crazy anime, overdramatic, melodramatic, self-indulgent storytelling, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is that. For those of you who played it, the end of Chapter 5 and the beginning of Chapter 6, one of the best sequences of any game ever, period. And this cast of characters, my god, the cast of characters, they're all so lovable. And ask me on a different day of the week, or ask me who my favorite Xenoblade Chronicles 3 character is, and I'll probably give you a different answer any day of the week. Today it's Uni, tomorrow it might be Mio, next day it might be Taion, next day Manana, I don't know. But there are so many wonderful characters in this game. You know, I think the story's themes, I don't want to go too much into spoiler territory, but the story's themes really resonated with me, I think, at a time where I'm, like, at the place where I'm at in my life personally. So I think there's also an element of this also being the right game at the right time for me, and so that's also another reason it resonated so strongly. And, you know, I'll say it, I've never been the biggest fan of Xenoblade's battle systems, and that's still true here. But it didn't matter, because everything else around it was so incredibly compelling that I didn't really mind that I didn't love the battle system. And to be fair, though, the battle system is, I think, Xenoblade 3's iteration of it is the best it's been. I like it a lot more than Xenoblade 2's. So I can overlook the fact that personally the combat isn't my favorite, but there are so many moving parts to it, and it's so flexible and accessible in terms of difficulty that even if you don't love the way the combat works in Xenoblade or Xenoblade 3 specifically, you can still have a really good time with it because the game allows you to play it however you want, interface with it however you want, put as much time into the different parts of the combat system as you want. So in the end, it didn't really matter that the combat system wasn't my favorite, just because I still got to play it the way I wanted to, and everything else about the game was so great. And the music, I mean, what can you even say about the music? It also has my favorite soundtrack of the year, and there's so much incredible music in this game, I can't even begin to name it all, so I won't, because I've already been going on for a little while here. So I think it's about time I wrap things up, but yes, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Horizon Forbidden West, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 round out my top 3 games of the year. And that's it. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all for an amazing 2022. You have no idea how much your support means to us, and means to me and everybody on the GVG crew. Genuinely, thank you so much, and we will see you in 2023. Bye!